Welcome to the PinLeader Podcast, where strategic leaders get straight to the topics, strengthening our awareness and sharpening our minds. The PinLeader Podcast is produced by Roar, a production division of Mays & Associates Ltd. Find out more at www.maysassociatesltd.com. Now here is your award-winning host, Dr. Shanda Gore.
And welcome back to the PinLeader Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about transformational change. And I have with me Mr. Tony Lockwood, who is a transformation strategist. He is also a recognized leader in organizational change. He has more than 25 years experience guiding businesses through complex transitions. He's the founder of the Transformation Leaders Hub, and he's built a dynamic community for change professionals, which we all need to understand what that change means, right? He is also the creator of the Transformation Leaders Body of Knowledge, PL-BOK, a comprehensive framework that provides transformation professionals with methodologies, tools, and best practices to successfully lead change. In addition to all that, he's also leading the Transformation Leaders Hub and the host of the Transformation Leaders Podcast. So if you haven't caught on, he's definitely a transformational leader. Without further ado, welcome, Tony.
Hi, Shanda. Thank you for that introduction. It's a very long name badge that I carry around with me each day.
I love the name, though. It's got movement already built into it, and it says, listen, we need to have that transformational component to our leadership style. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, how do you define and explain to me what transformation leadership is?
Well, thanks, Shanda. Yeah, I think transformation leadership means a lot of different things to lots of different people. On my podcast, I open up with the question, how do you define transformation? And after 100 or so episodes, I don't think I've had the same answer. But to me, it's about fundamental change. It's about changing states within an organization. It's not about continuous improvement. In the world that we live in today, where things happen on a daily basis, political ramifications, the globalization, new technology, etc., organizations need to be nimble. They need to be aware of what's coming up. They need to be aware of the opportunities that presents to them. And in some cases, they need to adapt significantly to meet either threats head on or take advantage of opportunities. And that's where transformation comes from, really, in my experience. Transformation leader is someone that leans into that and sees it as an opportunity and drives that transformation. That could be someone who's in a formal program, project, transformation leader type of role, chief transformation officer, for instance. Or it could be just an operational leader or a chief exec or a member of the C-suite that actually leans into change and really looks to drive the organization forward, driving that transformation on a day-to-day basis.
You know, that you bring up a good point about the transformation and the process itself. But what advice would you give leaders to, for them before the change happens, before the transformation happens? What advice to prepare for that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people jump into different aspects of change and transformation and focusing on small areas. So a good example of that is that organizations pick up the next shiny object in terms of new technology, AI being the one these days. Everyone's saying, how are we adapting our organization to take advantage of AI? And absolutely, there are opportunities for AI in many organizations. But if you look at technology, for instance, in isolation, it's highly likely that you won't achieve the outcomes that you're looking to achieve. And that's where I created a 9-pillar framework within the Transformation Leaders Body of Knowledge. And those 9 pillars are the essential elements that you need to consider as you're going through and thinking about the transformation that's ahead. 4 of the 9 are about building the roadmap. 3 are about actually driving the change. And 2 of them are about sort of the governance and financial management. So I think to answer your question directly, it's a matter, I think, of stepping back before you jump in and really planning out and understanding some core aspects. And it all starts, in my experience, with answering the question, why? Why are we doing this? Why do we believe that we need to transform? get clarity about the why, and then get a very, very clear vision for the future where you're trying to get to, what I call the North Star. And you can then drive everything off that sort of core aspect. And without that clear vision and without really understanding the why, you're probably not going to set the transformation up for success.
When you mentioned the why and the North Star, that guiding, to me, I also look at it as that plan, because sometimes you do your best to plan, your strategic plan, but then, when we talk about pin leaders, the best and the effective ones know how and know when they have to pivot. And so,
Yes.
so your North Star you have a guiding, a roadmap as best as you can. But it sounds like even this chief transformation officer that you mentioned, which again, I think that's a new position, or at least a title that you have in that C-suite area. Would they be the ones that actually help do that for you? Or is it, again, if you don't have a CTO, who would be that person to help with that North Star and guiding?
Well, I think that the role of that chief transformation officer, if that person exists, is more to facilitate discussion and help to gain alignment. If that role doesn't exist within an organization, any one of the C-suite members can take on that role. Typically, to be fair, it's the CEO that will look to drive it and coalesce their team to help build out clarity around that vision and clarity around that why. The key aspect is getting all of the C-suite aligned to that common vision and moving forward as one, with clear understanding of why we're doing it, where we're going to, and then as you're building out the plans, looking at the other 8 pillars, how we're actually going to transition from where we are now to where we want to get to. You're absolutely right. You can any plan, I suppose, soon as you commit a plan to paper, it's out of date because things happen around you. So you have to be quite agile. You have to be able to pivot, but doing it in a structured way. And when you're making decisions, having clarity around, is this decision taking us closer to or further away from where we want to get to? And at the same time, keeping challenging ourselves to say, is where we want to get to, our North Star, is that still valid? I think those are critical aspects of successful leadership.
You mentioned those 8 steps, and you're in the UK, and I was going to ask you, do you see any differences because you work globally like we do? Our firm works globally too. Do you see any differences in some of the approaches in your 8 steps, or do you see more emphasis made on certain parts depending on what part of the world you're working in?
I'm not too sure whether or not there are any geographical differences. Because the 8 pillars are quite high level. I think when you go into each of them and start to work through, then geographical biases do come in and different people react in different ways. One of the pillars is around culture, organizational culture, for instance. And there are significant cultural differences in different regions across an organization. And being cognizant of that and understanding that, and as a leader, making sure that you put yourselves in the shoes of the people that you're talking to, you're communicating to, and use language that's appropriate in that environment. Again, another key aspect of successful leadership. So I think there are, when you get into the detail of understanding how you actually going to take an organization on that journey, understanding the nuances, the differences in culture, differences in the way people react to certain things is critical. But I think one additional aspect is that, yes, absolutely, in terms of US-based teams will react to certain things in a slightly different way to UK-based teams or to Australian-based teams. But you could say that within an organization. I work with organizations that have got multiple offices, or every organization has multiple functions, and there may be subcultures in those different offices, or sometimes even subcultures within each function. And it's just being aware of those subcultures and understanding what you need to do to help people to go on the journey with you.
I can't agree with you more, because I think people think that it's one large culture with this one organization and that it's the same across all the departments. And that is just not true. You really,
No.
truly have to understand the culture that you're going into in per even department, in office location. And it's important to, again, understand the dynamics, who are the leaders there, and then the style that's being used in that culture, and then in fairness, trying to make sure that the culture is effective and that it's sustainable. And that's a key. Is it sustainable? Is it a surrounding an individual? And how the biases, I think you mentioned the biases, or how they may approach a problem, or if that leader were removed and then someone else comes in, does the culture maintain, or does it surround the personality? And I call it the cult of personality. And you don't want that either, because that's not sustainable.
Totally agree.
So you mentioned AI, and I think there's a number of organizations really trying to figure out how does it play a part as a part of a team, as potentially I mentioned, I've had the privilege of, talking about AI as even a leader, which is a concept that's hard to really put your head around at this point, but it can, and I call it like a reluctant leader, because sometimes depending on how you ask it, it may tell you it is a leader, and sometimes it'll say, no, I'm just here to support you. How do you see
Yes.
the role of that in organizational structures? And you mentioned again, some may overrate it on how it may influence, but can you explain what you think and how you could forecast how AI plays a part?
Yeah. The organisations I'm working with at the moment in a consultancy capacity that's looking at AI and how to take advantage of technology that is developing massively quickly every day. Certainly, the recommendation is to treat it like you would treat any other member of staff.
Hmm.
That use AI as as another staff member. Utilize it in a way that helps you to achieve your outcomes in a more efficient, in a more consistent, and typically quicker way. And then release that will then hopefully release time for your existing team members to be a little bit more creative, and so to take away the more mundane activities, the more um, administrative, shall we say, activities, or even research activities, for instance, so that you can release the person's time to be able to focus upon the creative stuff. Because in the main, at the moment, in the main, AI looks backwards and looks at what's already there and starts to pull things together in the way that you ask it to pull things together. Creativity is always looking forward. So if you can release your existing members, team members, to look forward and think about what's going to help the organisation get closer to its North Star quicker by removing administrative type of activities that AI can come in and help, I think that's a massive opportunity for lots of organisations.
To your point, again, that looking backwards versus looking forward, I stress to organizations right now who are saying, I can have my strategic plan written by AI, and I caution them because it is pulling on past information. It is a tool. The research is great, especially if you're building history and trying to understand where you come from. But being mindful, it has a lot of holes in it. And just like any team member, you wouldn't rely on a new team member who just joined your staff to write a strategic plan. Be careful on how you use it, and just know to check your sources.
Absolutely, and work on the 80-20 rule. You're never going to get anything 100% right. So let's don't try to get 100% right. Don't believe that it's whatever it churns out is going to be right completely. But it can take a significant part of the time it takes to do the research. For instance, it can reduce that down to minutes rather than days. And but you utilize it in that way, and then spend some time that's freed up to think about stuff, and put the extra 20% or the extra 30% on top of that strategic plan that will actually make the difference. It will make it unique. It will be forward thinking. It will be helping you to achieve the outcomes that you're looking to achieve.
Excellent. Well, I do have the fun questions, which you read so much, and I need to ask you, what are you reading and what are you watching?
So what am I reading? I love history. I think there's you can learn a lot from history, and in today's world in particular, there's so many analogies and similarities to what was happening 100 or so years ago. So at the moment, I'm reading a book. I live in the UK. My nearest city and my hometown is Manchester. So I'm reading a book about the history of Manchester. And Manchester was probably the first major metropolitan city in the Industrial Revolution. So that's the book that's on the bedside table. What am I watching? I watch a lot of different things, but probably I put a post up on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago about it. Actually, probably late to the show, but we've just started watching Ted Lasso.
Oh, okay.
And the reason I raise that is that although I've been saying to my wife, I think we should watch this Ted Lasso. I think it sounds like it's really good. Sounds like it's really funny. And my wife doesn't like football at all. It's supposedly everyone thought it was about football, but we put it on. I eventually got her to convince that we should watch the first one, and we realised very quickly there's so much of that show that is transferable into business.
Yes.
It's untrue.
Yes.
So we're in the middle of season 2 Ted Lasso at the moment.
I had a guest on, Chris Peterson, who mentioned Ted Lasso. They're really great examples. Even though it's fictional characters. The key here, especially for those that are in other countries that say, well, who's a Ted Lasso? But if they're listening, it's truly a show that has a lot of leadership components in it, and it kind of pokes fun at different leadership constructs.
It does, yeah. And does it in a really effective way. It's far better than a lot of the training programs that you've watched in the past. Because it's light-hearted look at stuff, but what you can see very clearly in the characters are people that you work with day in, day out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a good, bad, and indifferent, but it is, even with the bad, it can make you laugh at the personalities, and you can identify who they are, saying, I know that person, I worked with them, I talked to them today. So yes, very much so. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing really what transformational and transformative change would look like. And of course, sharing those 8 different pieces to this model that you've created that's gone global. And your podcast is excellent. I would encourage anyone to really tune in and listen to that and catch it and share it. It's a great podcast, and follow you on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Great conversation as ever. And good luck with this podcast.
Thank you very much. And thank you to our listeners who are sharing the show and liking it. We appreciate you. Thank you to our sponsor, Edward Jones, Jennifer Penzition. If you need financial advising, please go see her. Also, too, don't forget the PinLeader Path is now out on Amazon. Please check it out and make sure you get your copy. And of course, until next time.
The PinLeader Podcast is hosted by Dr. Shanda Gore and brought to you by Mays & Associates Ltd., creating customized solutions for growth in the areas of leadership development, strategic planning, and culture building. Find out more at www.maysassociatesltd.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the PinLeader Podcast and share with others.